Every single country on Earth is in debt. The United States now owes over $38 trillion, the highest figure in the history of human civilization. The European Union carries a burden of $14 trillion. Japan, nearly $9 trillion. Even the oil-rich monarchies of the Middle East and the export giants like Germany and China owe sums so vast they defy comprehension. But here is the paradox that breaks the brain. If every nation owes money, who exactly is owed? If the entire planet is in the red, is there a creditor on Mars? This is the financial historian. Today, we are stepping into the engine room of the global economy, where money, power, and history collide, and nothing, absolutely nothing, is as simple as it looks on the news. Debt isn't just a burden. It is the invisible architecture of the modern world. Every war you read about, every financial crisis that destroys savings, every economic boom and bust sits on top of this invisible scaffolding of IOUs. And if you have the patience to follow the chain of creditors long enough, you discover something deeply unsettling. The world doesn't owe money to anyone in particular. It owes it to itself. But do not mistake this for a victimless crime. Just because we owe it to ourselves doesn't mean everyone benefits equally. To understand how we reach this tipping point of planet, drowning in over $315 trillion of total debt, nearly 3 times the size of the global economy, we need to go back. Before the algorithms, before the stock tickers, before the credit card, the idea of national debt was born not in a bank, but in the trenches of war. The year is 1694. England is fighting France in the 9 Years' War. King William III is desperate. He is running out of gold, and soldiers don't fight for free. In the old world, a king would simply seize land or melt down the church silver. But William did something revolutionary. He turned to the merchants of London. He offered them a deal. In exchange for a permanent stream of interest payments backed by future taxation of the citizenry, the merchants would finance the crown's war. To manage this new arrangement, the Bank of England was created. It was a moment of alchemy. The state could now spend money it didn't yet have, and in return, the lenders received something priceless, a government bond, a promise, a piece of paper that could be traded, bought, or sold as if it were gold itself. This was the seed of the modern financial system. France copied it. The Netherlands refined it. The newly independent United States adopted it to fund its revolution and its expansion westward. National debt became not a mark of failure, but a measure of credibility. The ability to borrow became the ability to rule. Empires once conquered territory to extract resources. Now, they issued bonds to extract interest. The battlefield became the balance sheet. Fast forward 3 centuries. Debt has become the world's dominant export. Global borrowing increases by the equivalent of $1 trillion every 100 days. Every country owes. Every bank lends. Every citizen, through their taxes, their savings, and their pensions, is unknowingly both a debtor and a creditor. But who holds the other end of the rope? Let's dissect the United States, the anchor of the global system. Out of that $38 trillion mountain, about half is publicly held. But who is the public? Roughly 2/3 of those investors are American entities, banks, pension funds, mutual funds, insurance companies, and crucially, the Federal Reserve itself. The remaining third, about $9 trillion, sits in foreign hands. Japan is the top holder. China is second. Then the UK, Luxembourg, Belgium. So when politicians scream that the US is owned by China, they are selling you a ghost story. That is true for only roughly 2% of the total. Most of the debt America owes is to America. The Treasury issues bonds. Banks buy them. The Federal Reserve buys them back, creating new dollars in the process. Americans pay taxes to fund the interest on those bonds, which then flows back into American retirement accounts. It is a circular mirror. The debt is real, but the creditor is mostly a reflection of the same system. And this circularity is planetary. Japan lends to the US through treasuries. The US lends to Europe through the IMF. Europe lends to developing nations through the World Bank. Developing nations lend back to advanced economies by parking their reserves in Western bonds. It is a planetary game of hot potato, except the potato is made of promises. Every country holds someone else's IOU. Every promise is secured by another promise. It is a poker table where every player has borrowed chips from the person to their right, and the only rule keeping the game alive is that nobody stands up. But there is a fourth layer, the most powerful of all, the markets. Behind every government bond sits a web of institutions, hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks managing tens of trillions in assets. They are the true arbiters of credit. They decide which nations can borrow cheaply and which will pay a premium for survival. When they lose confidence, currencies collapse, governments fall, and the high priest of this system is the central bank. Central banks don't merely manage debt, they manufacture it. Every time the Federal Reserve buys a bond, it creates money out of thin air. The liability of one balance sheet becomes the asset of another. Every dollar in your pocket represents a unit of debt somewhere else. There is no such thing as debt-free money in the system. For decades, this loop has sustained itself through one thing: confidence. As long as investors believe governments will pay the interest, even if they never pay the principal, the machine keeps turning. But what happens when confidence wavers? We have seen the preview. Greece, 2010. The debt became unpayable. Bondholders panicked. The rescue came with a price: austerity, tax hikes, mass unemployment. Bailout became a synonym for sacrifice. Argentina, Sri Lanka. When the system breaks, the creditors suddenly become visible. The anonymous bondholders hold entire nations by the throat. And yet, even after collapse, the logic restarts. New loans replace old ones. Because in the 21st century, sovereign debt is not designed to be repaid. It is designed to be rolled over. Governments today do not plan to pay off their debt. Not now. Not ever. That is not a conspiracy theory. It is stated economic policy. They treat debt like a subscription service. They issue new bonds to pay off old ones. Economists call it refinancing. I call it the forever loan. The global economy depends on this rent. Like a shark that must keep swimming to breathe, the financial system must keep borrowing to exist. The United States will never clear its debt. It will refinance it until the end of time. Japan has been rolling over debt for decades. Why? Because for the investors, government debt is the safest collateral in existence. A U.S. Treasury bond is the foundation of global markets. If Washington actually paid off its debt, the world would run out of safe assets. The dollar supply would shrink. The economy would collapse. Paying off the debt would destroy the very thing that makes the economy function. So, they keep issuing more. Rhythmically, the debt becomes the heartbeat of capitalism. When politicians talk about balancing the budget, they are selling an illusion. The goal isn't to eliminate debt. It's to keep it sustainable, to keep the world believing. Because once belief fades, the numbers stop mattering. That is the real secret. The plan was never to pay it back. The plan is to keep the world believing they will. It is a closed loop of trust. But remember, trust is not evenly distributed. When we say we owe it to ourselves, that is only half true. Interest payments flow upward, from taxpayers and workers to the institutions and investors that hold the paper. Debt is a transfer mechanism, not just between countries, but between classes. That is why global inequality and global indebtedness rise in tandem. The system rewards those who own debt and punishes those who merely pay it. Creditors aren't villains. Debtors aren't victims. They are two sides of the same engine. But what happens when the engine runs out of fuel? When new borrowing can't keep pace with the promises made yesterday? That is when the question, who is the creditor, stops being abstract. Because at the top of this pyramid, there isn't one face to blame. It isn't China, it isn't Wall Street, it is the system itself. The line between debtor and creditor has blurred beyond recognition. Debt once meant bondage. Today, it means balance. But if that balance ever tips, if the confidence breaks, the illusion ends. And we will remember what debt really is, a promise that cannot be kept forever. If this gave you a new perspective on the invisible chains of the world, subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.